There was a time when I couldn't say a single sentence in English without fear. My tongue froze, my mind went blank, and every word felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. People around me spoke so easily, but for me, English was a wall that separated who I was from who I wanted to become. Until one day, something inside me snapped, and I made a decision that changed everything. I stopped trying to learn English and started to reprogram my brain to think in it. What happened next felt almost magical, but it wasn't magic. It was transformation. I remember the first time English made me feel small. I was standing in front of a group of people, trying to introduce myself, and the words just wouldn't come out. My heart pounded so loudly that I could barely hear my own voice. I felt every eye on me, waiting, judging. That moment stayed with me for years. Every time I opened a book or listened to a video in English, I felt like an outsider trying to break into a secret club. I thought the problem was my memory, my accent, maybe even my intelligence. But the truth was simpler and harder. My mind wasn't programmed for English yet. I was still translating every thought from my language to English, and that slow process kept me stuck. I realized that fluency isn't just about knowing words. It's about thinking in a new language. The people who spoke English naturally didn't memorize lists or grammar charts. Their brains had accepted English as their default system. I wanted that freedom. I wanted to wake up and think in English like I breathe it. But at that time, my mind refused. It kept pulling me back to my native words, my native rhythm. It was like trying to rewrite a computer program while it's still running. I felt trapped between two worlds, the one I spoke in and the one I dreamed of joining. Then came the night that changed everything. I was watching an interview with someone I admired, a musician speaking in perfect English, full of confidence and emotion. And I thought, he's not smarter than me. He just thinks differently. That single thought hit me hard. Maybe I didn't need to learn English anymore. Maybe I needed to retrain my brain to think like someone who already speaks it. That night, I sat down and started to listen, not just to understand, but to absorb. I stopped caring about meaning and focused on rhythm, tone, and flow. I listened to how words danced together. I let my brain soak in English like a song I'd heard 1,000 times before. Slowly, something began to shift inside me. Days turned into weeks, and my fear turned into curiosity. I started talking to myself in English, quietly at first. I'd describe what I was doing. I'm cooking, I'm tired, I need to rest. It felt strange, but it was working. My brain was starting to connect English to my daily life, not just to study sessions. Every mistake I made became a new doorway. Instead of feeling shame, I treated mistakes like updates to my software. I noticed how babies learn their first language. They don't study, they repeat, they absorb, they imitate. And suddenly it all made sense. I didn't need to be perfect. I needed to be consistent. So I built a new habit. Every morning, I'd spend 10 minutes thinking only in English. Not reading, not speaking, just thinking. I'd imagine conversations, answers, even random thoughts, all in English. At first, it felt forced, like I was acting. But soon, my thoughts started to flow naturally. English words appeared in my head before I could translate. That's when I knew the reprogramming had begun. I remember walking down the street one day and realizing that the voice in my head, the one that narrates my thoughts, was speaking English. That moment felt surreal. It was like hearing my own mind switch languages without asking permission. I smiled, because I finally understood what true fluency feels like, not effort, but freedom. But freedom always comes with resistance. Some days my brain fought back. I'd slip into my old language, forget words, or doubt myself. But I reminded myself, reprogramming takes time. You can't install a new system overnight. You have to keep feeding it the right data until it becomes natural. I started surrounding myself with English everywhere. My phone, my music, my notebooks, everything switched to English. I didn't just want to learn it, I wanted to live in it. The more I immersed myself, the more my brain accepted it as normal. English stopped feeling foreign. It started to feel like home. Then I made a rule: no fear, no shame. Every time I spoke and made a mistake, I laughed instead of hiding. That simple mindset change was powerful. It told my brain that English was safe, not scary. My confidence grew. My sentences got smoother. People started noticing, asking how I improved so fast. I'd smile and say, "I didn't learn English. I trained my brain to speak it." As the weeks passed, I became addicted to progress. I stopped measuring how many words I knew and started focusing on how naturally I could express myself. I realized that fluency isn't about vocabulary, it's about connection. When you reprogram your brain, you stop focusing on the words and start focusing on meaning. Sometimes I test myself by thinking of complex emotions or memories and describing them in English. It wasn't easy, but it pushed my limits. My brain started building new bridges, new associations. The more I practiced, the faster those connections became. I could finally feel the language flowing through me, not just sitting in books. Looking back, that was the turning point. I had stopped seeing English as an academic subject and started treating it as a living part of me. My brain wasn't fighting anymore, it was cooperating. It had accepted the new language, and with it, a new version of me was born. That's when I understood the deeper truth. Learning a language isn't about skill. It's about identity. The moment you stop saying, "English is hard," and start saying, "English is mine," everything changes. I had to let go of the person who struggled and become the person who spoke freely. The journey wasn't about grammar or accent. It was about mindset, reprogramming the way I saw myself. Because your brain listens to your beliefs. If you tell yourself, "I can't," your mind shuts the door. But if you whisper, "I can," your brain starts building the path. The day I realized I could speak English without thinking, I didn't celebrate. I just smiled quietly, because I knew I had crossed an invisible line. My thoughts, my dreams, even my inner voice, all spoke English. That was my proof. My brain had been reprogrammed. And from that moment on, everything I learned, every person I met, every opportunity one took, came from that new version of me who believed that nothing is impossible when you teach your brain to believe otherwise. After the first few weeks of reprogramming my brain, I realized something powerful. Language is not learned in a classroom, it's trained like a muscle. Every word I spoke, every sentence I formed, was a small workout for my mind. And just like muscles, The brain grows through repetition and challenge. In the beginning, my progress was invisible. I'd listen to English podcasts every morning and feel like I understood nothing. But I kept going. My goal wasn't to understand, it was to adapt. I trusted that my brain was absorbing patterns even when I couldn't see results. That patience became my secret weapon. One day, something strange happened. I was listening to a conversation, and suddenly, I caught an entire sentence without translating it. It felt like my brain unlocked a new level. I paused the audio, smiled, and whispered to myself, "It's working!" That tiny win gave me the confidence to push harder. I started treating my brain like an athlete treats their body. I gave it the right diet, English input, every single day. I removed the junk, fear, doubt, negative thoughts. I surrounded myself with English sounds, music, shows, and thoughts. Slowly, the rewiring got stronger. But it wasn't easy. Some days I felt exhausted, mentally drained, as if my brain wanted to shut down. The old patterns tried to return. My native language whispered in the background, tempting me to give up. But I had made a promise to myself. This time, there was no quitting. So I turned the process into something enjoyable. Instead of studying, I started playing with English. I'd mimic actors from movies, copy their tone, their pauses, their emotions. I wasn't just repeating words. I was training my mind to feel the language. That emotional connection made the process come alive. Every night before sleeping, I listened to English stories. Sometimes I understood, sometimes I didn't. But my brain didn't care, it just kept listening, adapting, learning. I realized that exposure was more important than perfection. The more I fed my mind, the faster it evolved. Soon, English became my daily soundtrack. Even silence felt filled with English thoughts. I'd dream in fragments of English sentences, wake up with random phrases in my head. That's when I knew my subconscious had joined the mission. My brain was practicing even when I wasn't. But the real transformation came when I learned to enjoy mistakes. I used to fear them. Every wrong word felt like failure. Now I saw them as proof of growth. Each time I made a mistake, my brain was forced to correct itself, and that's how rewiring happens. Mistakes became my best teachers. I also noticed something fascinating. When I was relaxed, English flowed naturally. But when I felt pressure, I stumbled. That's when I understood, fluency isn't about how much you know, it's about how calm your mind is. Anxiety blocks your natural rhythm. So I began training my mind to stay calm, even when speaking in front of others. I practiced mindfulness in English. I'd sit quietly, breathe, and think in simple sentences. I am calm. I can speak. I understand. These small affirmations reshaped my mindset. My confidence stopped depending on how perfect I sounded and started depending on how focused I felt. One day, I met someone new who spoke fluent English. Normally, I would have panicked. But this time, something inside me felt different. I listened carefully, answered slowly, and to my surprise the words just came. Not perfectly, but naturally. I didn't think, I just spoke. And that moment felt like magic. That night, I realized that true fluency isn't about knowledge. It's about comfort. The brain learns best when it feels safe. That's why so many people struggle. They live in fear of judgment. I had to remove that fear completely. The more I spoke without shame, the faster I grew. So I made another rule. I'd talk to anyone who gave me a chance. Taxi drivers, shopkeepers, online strangers, it didn't matter. Every conversation was an opportunity to train my mind in real time. I stopped seeing myself as a student and started seeing myself as a communicator. The biggest turning point came when I stopped measuring progress in grammar or vocabulary. Instead, I measured it in freedom. Could I express my emotions? Could I share my thoughts? Could I connect with people? When the answer became yes, I knew the reprogramming was working. Still, there were moments of doubt. Some days, my mind went blank again. I'd forget simple words and feel like I'd lost everything. But I learned to laugh at those moments. They weren't setbacks. They were reminders that growth is not a straight line. My brain was still adjusting, still updating its system. During one quiet evening, I recorded myself speaking English for the first time. My voice trembled, my accent was heavy, but I didn't stop. I listened to that recording the next day and almost cried. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was proof that I had come far from the person who once stayed silent. From then on, I started documenting my progress. Every month, I'd record a short video of myself speaking. And every month, I could hear the change, the rhythm, the confidence, the natural flow. My voice had changed, but more importantly, my belief had changed. That's when I discovered the hidden power of belief in brain reprogramming. You can't change your language if you don't change your identity. I had to stop saying, "I'm trying to learn English." Instead, I started saying, "I'm an English speaker in progress." That mindset told my brain who I was becoming. Belief creates new neural pathways. Every time I affirmed my progress, my brain responded by reinforcing it. The science behind it is simple. The brain builds what you focus on. If you keep focusing on your weaknesses, they grow. If you focus on progress, it accelerates. So I became intentional with my thoughts. Every morning I tell myself, "Today I think in English." And I did. I didn't wait for perfection. I acted as if my brain was already programmed for English. That, as if, mindset was the engine that drove my transformation. I learned to visualize myself speaking fluently, confidently, freely. I imagined conversations going smoothly, people understanding me, laughter flowing easily. The brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. It believes what you feed it. And so, I fed it fluency. With time, those mental pictures became real moments. I'd walk into situations that once scared me and realize I was handling them effortlessly. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was living it. The language had moved from my mind into my identity. I remember one particular day clearly. I was sitting in a cafe, talking with a friend in English for over an hour. We discussed music, dreams, life, everything. I didn't notice time passing. When we finished, my friend smiled and said, "You sound like you've been speaking English forever." That was the moment I knew the training had become natural. My brain had stopped resisting. The effort had turned into instinct. That's what reprogramming really means. Doing something so consistently that it stops being new and starts being you. My brain had accepted the new code, and my world expanded because of it. I realized then that language is a mirror of your mindset. The more open, patient, and curious you are, the faster you learn. Fear closes the mind, curiosity opens it. And my biggest strength became curiosity. I stopped judging myself and started asking, what can I learn from this moment? The more I spoke, the more alive I felt. English wasn't just a language anymore. It was my connection to the world, to knowledge, to new versions of myself. Every conversation was a chance to grow not just linguistically, but emotionally. My mind had evolved beyond words. Looking back, I saw how every small choice mattered, every morning thought in English, every podcast I didn't understand, every sentence I dared to speak. Each one was a brick in the foundation of fluency. Reprogramming my brain wasn't a single act. It was a daily commitment built on patience and purpose. And the best part was realizing that the process wasn't just about learning English. It was about learning myself. I had trained my brain to believe in possibility. If I could do this, what else could I reprogram? That thought sparked something new inside me, a hunger to keep evolving, in every part of my life. Because once you understand that your brain listens to your beliefs, you stop being a victim of limitation. You start being the architect of your own mind. And that's exactly what I had become, not just a fluent speaker, but a builder of my own transformation. There came a point when English stopped being just a language and became a part of who I was. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did, slowly, quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. One morning, I realized I no longer had to try to think in English. I just did. And that realization changed how I saw myself. When I looked back at the person I used to be, the one who hesitated, doubted, and feared judgment, it felt like remembering an old version of me. I still loved that version, but I knew I had outgrown it. The struggle had shaped me, but the transformation had redefined me. I was no longer just learning English, I was living it. Speaking English had become more than communication. It had become identity. The words I used began to shape the way I thought about everything, about success, emotions, even love. English carried a rhythm, a tone, a perspective that opened new doors inside my mind. It changed not just my speech but my thinking. It was strange at first. When I thought in English, I felt calmer, more logical. When I thought in my native language, I felt more emotional, more attached. I realized that each language brings its own personality. And somehow, English had helped me find balance. It became the language of my confidence. But identity transformation is never simple. There were moments when I felt disconnected from my old self. Some friends said, "You sound different now." And they were right. My voice, my expressions, even the way I told stories had changed. I wasn't trying to imitate anyone. I was just evolving naturally. At first, I worried that maybe I was losing something, my roots, my original self. But then I understood that learning a new language doesn't replace who you are. It expands who you are. It gives you another version of yourself, one that can see the world through a wider lens. That realization filled me with gratitude. I started to see my brain like a universe that keeps expanding. English wasn't invading it, it was adding stars, new galaxies of thought. The more I spoke, the more I discovered new parts of my personality. I found myself expressing ideas I never had words for before. That's what fluency really is, finding more ways to be yourself. Confidence became my new habit. The more I spoke, the more I trusted myself. Even when I made mistakes, I didn't panic anymore. I'd laugh, correct myself, and move on. I realized confidence isn't the absence of mistakes, it's the belief that mistakes can't stop you. As my confidence grew, so did my opportunities. I started conversations I would have once avoided. I connected with people from different countries, listened to their stories, and shared mine. Each exchange reminded me how powerful language truly is. It's a bridge between minds, not a test of perfection. One night, I was on a video call with a friend from another part of the world. We talked for hours, laughing, debating, dreaming. At one point, I paused and realized this entire friendship wouldn't exist if I hadn't reprogrammed my brain. That thought humbled me deeply. It wasn't just about language anymore. It was about connection. But transformation always comes with resistance. Some people around me didn't understand why I was changing. They saw the new me as distant, maybe even strange. They didn't realize that English had given me a new way to think, a new layer of expression. It wasn't about showing off, it was about growth. I learned that when you expand your mind, not everyone will grow with you. Some will admire you. Others will misunderstand you. But I decided not to shrink back. I had worked too hard to let fear define me again. My brain had learned a new rhythm, and I was going to live by it proudly. English had also reshaped how I saw time and effort. I used to believe big change took years. But reprogramming my brain taught me something else. Change happens the moment your mind accepts a new identity. Once I started believing I was an English speaker, everything accelerated. That belief didn't just change my words, it changed my thoughts about life. I became more open, curious, willing to try. I started learning new things faster, because now I trusted my brain's ability to adapt. English had become proof that I could transform any part of my mind if I committed to it. Every conversation I had in English felt like an affirmation of my growth. I didn't speak perfectly, but I spoke with authenticity. And people responded to that. They weren't listening for flawless grammar, they were listening for sincerity. That taught me something powerful. Connection is more important than perfection. There were still quiet nights when I'd sit alone, thinking about how far I'd come. I'd remember those first days of fear, the struggle to pronounce words, the frustration of not being understood. And then I'd look at the present, the comfort, the confidence, the peace. My heart would fill with gratitude. I had rewritten my story. I realized that reprogramming the brain is also reprogramming your emotions. Every time I replace fear with excitement, doubt with patience, frustration with curiosity, I was rewiring more than neurons. I was reshaping my emotional identity. That's why the process worked so deeply. The biggest lesson was this: you can't speak freely until you feel free inside. My early struggles with English weren't about language. They were about fear of being seen, fear of failure. Once I healed that fear, my words flowed. My mind wasn't holding me hostage anymore. It was helping me shine. As my English improved, I noticed changes in other areas too. I became a better listener, not just in English but in every conversation. I became more patient, more empathetic. Learning a new language had trained me to slow down, to really understand before responding. That skill changed my relationships completely. I started to see patterns in how I learned, how I reacted, how I grew. My brain had become a mirror, showing me that mindset controls everything. Once I stopped fighting my weaknesses and started training my focus, everything became smoother, not just in English, but in life itself. One evening, I sat down to write my thoughts in English, just a journal entry. As I wrote, I noticed how natural it felt. The sentences formed themselves. The emotions translated perfectly. It wasn't just writing, it was thinking on paper. That moment felt powerful, like my two worlds had finally become one. From that day, I started journaling only in English. It became my mental gym, a place to train thoughts, emotions, and ideas in my second language. Each page strengthened the wiring in my brain. Each word made the new version of me more permanent. Then something beautiful happened. I started dreaming in English. At first, it was small fragments, phrases, or random conversations. But soon, entire dreams unfolded naturally. That's when I truly understood how deep reprogramming goes. When your subconscious starts speaking a language, it's no longer something you learn, it's something you are. Dreaming in English gave me confidence beyond words. It showed me that my brain had completely accepted this new reality. The walls between languages were gone. I was bilingual not just in speech but in thought. And that was one of the most liberating feelings I'd ever experienced. I began to notice how my brain reacted to challenges. If I forgot a word, I didn't panic. I improvised, used another phrase, or explained the meaning differently. That flexibility became my greatest strength. I realized fluency isn't about knowing every word, it's about never being stopped by the ones you don't know. With that new mindset, I stopped chasing perfection and started chasing progress. I wasn't trying to sound like a native speaker anymore. I wanted to sound like me, someone who speaks English confidently and authentically. My accent, my rhythm, my story, they were all part of who I was becoming. And the more I accepted myself, the more fluent I became. Acceptance creates calm, and calmness creates clarity. I no longer compared myself to others. I no longer feared judgment. My focus was simple: speak, connect, grow. That simplicity made the process effortless. By this point, my brain felt alive, sharper, faster, more flexible. English had become a workout for my mind. It improved my memory, my focus, even my creativity. I found myself thinking of new ideas more easily. My reprogrammed brain wasn't just speaking better, it was working better. Looking back, I understood the deeper meaning of it all. Learning English wasn't just about language. It was about unlocking the mind's potential. It was proof that no limitation is permanent. If I could rewire my brain for this, then I could rewire it for anything: confidence, success, peace, or purpose. And that realization became my greatest reward. Because the day I started thinking in English was also the day I started thinking differently about life. I no longer feared failure. I saw it as feedback. I no longer doubted my mind. I trusted it. My brain had become my partner in growth. Now, when I speak, I don't just use words, I use belief. Every sentence I form reminds me that transformation begins inside. English gave me a new voice, But reprogramming my brain gave me a new identity. I had become the person I always wanted to be, confident, open, and free. When I finally accepted that English was now part of who I was, I wanted to understand how it had happened. I didn't just want to speak fluently. I wanted to know what made my brain change so deeply. That curiosity led me to explore the science of habits, the power of repetition, and the art of training the subconscious mind. I began studying how the brain forms connections. I learned that every new thought creates a tiny pathway in the brain, a neural circuit. The more you repeat that thought, the stronger the circuit becomes. That's how habits form. So, if I could build new circuits for English, I could make fluency automatic. I decided to make English not a task but a lifestyle. From the moment I woke up, I surrounded myself with it. My phone's language changed. My playlist changed. Even the notes on my mirror were written in English. I didn't give my brain a chance to escape. It had no choice but to adapt. But the real secret was visualization. Every morning, before starting my day, I would close my eyes and imagine myself speaking English confidently. I'd picture myself in conversations, relaxed, smiling, fluent. I could hear my voice, see the reactions of others, and feel the comfort of expressing myself freely. The first time I did it, it felt silly. But then I learned something incredible. The brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. When you visualize, your brain fires the same neurons it would if you were actually doing it. So, every time I imagined fluency, I was training it for real. I made it a daily ritual. For 10 minutes, I'd sit in silence and visualize success. I'd imagine myself thinking in English, understanding everything around me, and responding naturally. That mental picture became my guiding map. And day by day, my mind started matching that image in real life. Then I added sound association to my practice. I realized that language isn't just about words, it's about sound patterns. So I listened carefully to how English felt when spoken. I paid attention to rhythm, melody, and emotion. I tried to copy that flow, not word by word, but as music for the brain. Instead of memorizing, I mimicked. I'd play short clips of native speakers, repeat them aloud, and focus on energy, not grammar. My brain started to tune itself to English intonation, like adjusting a radio signal. Slowly, the language began to feel natural inside me. At night, I listened to English while I slept. Podcasts, audiobooks, interviews, anything with real voices. I wasn't trying to understand. I was letting my subconscious absorb. The brain stays active during sleep, especially when it hears familiar sounds. Over time, that passive exposure deepened the wiring. Then came another breakthrough: environment design. I learned that you can't grow in an environment that reminds you of who you used to be. So I redesigned mine. My walls had English quotes. My journal was in English. My entertainment, my devices, my daily thoughts, all in English. My world reflected the identity I was building. The more I aligned my surroundings, the faster my progress became. I understood that the environment doesn't just support habits, it creates them. If you wake up and everything around you speaks English, your brain naturally starts thinking in it. That's how reprogramming becomes effortless. But the most powerful technique came from self-talk. I started talking to myself in English, out loud, in my head, everywhere. I'm going for a walk. I'm feeling good. I can do this. It may sound simple, but it rewired my thought patterns. My inner voice switched languages before I even noticed. Every time I used English for inner thoughts, my brain strengthened that neural pathway. At first, it was awkward, but repetition made it automatic. I was teaching my mind a new internal dialogue. Soon, English wasn't just something I spoke, it became the language of my thoughts, decisions, and emotions. Another method that changed me was mirror practice. I'd stand in front of a mirror every morning and speak to my reflection in English. I didn't judge myself. I just talked about my plans, my feelings, my dreams. It wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. Seeing myself speak built confidence deep inside. There were days I'd look into my own eyes and say, "You can speak fluently. You already are fluent." Saying it out loud made it real. The more I affirmed it, the more my brain believed it. Confidence isn't born, it's built word by word, affirmation by affirmation, until it becomes truth. But I didn't stop there. I started experimenting with self-hypnosis for language learning. Not the movie kind, real, calm mental programming. I'd sit quietly, breathe deeply, and repeat affirmations like, "My mind absorbs English easily. I understand without effort. Speaking is natural for me." The goal was to bypass doubt and reach the subconscious mind, the place where beliefs live. After a few weeks, I noticed changes. My reactions became faster. I stopped freezing when someone spoke English to me. My brain had accepted the new belief: English is easy for me. To reinforce that, I combined hypnosis with habit stacking. Every time I did a daily habit, brushing my teeth, walking, making coffee, I'd attach English to it. I'd name the objects I touched, describe what I was doing, or say short sentences. These micro-moments trained my brain to link English with daily life. Over time, that consistency made English part of my identity, not just my routine. My brain didn't separate learning time from living time. It became one continuous flow of English exposure, both conscious and subconscious. That's when fluency stopped being something I chased. It became something I embodied. The process wasn't always smooth. There were moments when I felt mentally tired, as if my brain needed rest. And that's when I learned one more truth: rest is part of training. When you rest, your brain consolidates new connections. I started sleeping well, meditating, and letting my mind recharge. Sometimes, after a break, I'd wake up and realize I understood words I hadn't before. That's how the brain works. It grows in silence too. Reprogramming doesn't only happen when you're practicing. It also happens when you're patient. I also began practicing emotional connection with English. Instead of treating it as a technical skill, I attached feelings to it. I'd listen to emotional songs, watch heartfelt interviews, or write letters to myself in English. By connecting emotion to language, I made my brain remember more deeply. Emotions create stronger neural bonds than logic. That's why we never forget the words that made us feel something. I wanted English to feel like home, safe, warm, meaningful. So I made sure my brain associated it with joy, inspiration, and pride, not fear or frustration. Each technique I used became a piece of a larger puzzle. Visualization built the vision. Sound association gave rhythm. Environment design provided support. Self-talk rewired identity. And emotion gave it life. Together, they transformed English from a subject into a state of mind. After months of this, I reached a point where I didn't even realize I was thinking in English anymore. It just happened naturally, like breathing. My thoughts flowed without translation. My responses came instantly. That's the beauty of reprogramming. Once it's done, you don't have to force it. Looking back, I realized something profound. The human brain is limitless. It's not built to stay the same, it's built to adapt. We just have to feed it the right signals long enough for it to believe. Once it believes, it changes everything about how we see, feel, and express ourselves. The techniques I discovered didn't just help me speak better. They taught me discipline, self-awareness, and control over my thoughts. They showed me that fluency isn't a gift, it's a design. You can build it, sculpt it, and live it if you train your brain with patience and purpose. And that's when I made a promise to myself: never again would I say, "I can't," because my brain had proven that I could. I had reprogrammed not just my language but my entire mindset. And with that mindset, I knew there were no limits left to what I could learn or become.